Well, good morning, everyone in Facebook world. So, you see the title of my Tuesday morning. This is Tuesday morning. Good morning, everyone. Is You Are Being Played. Actually, we are being played, myself included. I'm not excluding myself out of this. Um, there's a lot going on in the world, and I want to make clear that I'm not saying that the coronavirus is not real. I'm not saying you're being played by a virus. I'm not saying you're being played by a black man getting killed by a cop. It's bigger than that. It is way bigger than that. You are culturally trained. First of all, and some of you that's listened to me for quite a while may have heard part of this before, but they say that repetition for emphasis, repetition is the key to learning. So even though you may have heard part of this before, we're going to go over it again for emphasis and for the benefit of giving food for thought on this June the 8th. It is here. We are taught that people had to fight and die for our freedoms. That's a form of patriotism. And we're indoctrinated with this stuff very early in life. This patriotism is the flags, the saluting the flag, and this emotional pull, the Star Spangled Banner. A lot of emotion is pulled with this. That emotion doesn't come from the flag itself. That emotion doesn't come from the music, the national anthem, that Star Spangled Banner. That emotion doesn't really derive from that. That emotion comes from the power that we give those things, from the power that we as a culture have been trained to empower those things with. It's just like in the world of the paranormal, people say, oh, the Ouija board is a dangerous thing. And the Ouija board has no more power than what you give it. And this is what's missed. Donald Trump has no more power than what we allow him. This is true throughout life. The Lord's Prayer, the Catholics are big with our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And there's a great pull with that. There's that people get a great feel from that, but really that it's nothing but words at the end of the day, just like the national anthem, just like the Pledge of Allegiance. It's nothing but words. Anybody can stand up, put on a dark suit, and pin a flag to their chest. Anybody can wear a cross. Anybody can put on the appearance of being something. I wear this around the house, and it's not something that people are used to seeing, especially in a public venue like what I'm doing here. So people make immediate judgments based upon what they see. We're very superficial. Those saying, you've heard this probably since your youth, don't judge a book by its cover, but we still do. And that makes it easy for people to play us. That makes it easy for the system to play us because we constantly judge by appearance. It's just a constant. Maybe we're not so bad in judging people by appearance, maybe, but we do. If we see somebody that has on something that looks like a uniform, maybe there's no patches on it, or maybe it's a patch that does not represent any authority. It's just something somebody made up. Our initial thought is there's a person of authority, there's a police or whatever. When I was younger, in my 20s, because it was so uncommon, just like it is today, it's so uncommon to see a well-dressed young person. Hell, it's uncommon today to see a well-dressed anybody on an average day. You go to the grocery store and the old, middle-aged, young, old guys, they all, T-shirts, blue jeans, ball caps, it's, we there's no uniqueness in the world. I would go out, I'd be well dressed, I'd be well groomed, as they say. And there was a reason for that, because I understood that the way you present yourself is the way that people will accept you, and it builds what you can get by with. Bottom line, I could walk in places because I carried myself a certain way. I've never been in the military, any area of the military. Never been in the military at all. But I was accused throughout my life, because of the way I carried myself, of having a military background. I've also been mistaken for police, undercover, vice. I got kicked out of a bar in Atlanta because they thought I was a undercover vice cop. I mean, and it's simply by the way I presented myself. I didn't have a gun on, didn't have any special thing. I just was better. I just physically, the way I grew myself with a jacket and, just street clothes, as they say. And people made these assumptions. I remember one time, again, back in my early 20s, a friend of mine and myself went to New Orleans. We're walking down Bourbon Street, and we're just kind of having fun. We weren't looking for prostitutes, but it was well known for prostitutes. We never could get approached by one, and you couldn't really tell which girl was a prostitute or not. We thought, well, you go on that side of the street and walk. I'll go on this street. Maybe because we're teamed up and we're just having fun. We're walking down the street, and I'm on this side of the street. He's on that side of the street. We're just walking along. And this drunk guy, or homeless guy, I can't say for sure he was drunk, kind of crawls out of the gutter and stops me and says, "What kind of piece you carrying?" I was pretty naive. I wasn't very worldly at that point, having grown up in a small town in North Alabama. We didn't have the internet. We didn't, if you, back in those days, we were kind of isolated from the world, really. Today, with the internet and everything, you're brought up in the world, so to speak. I didn't know what he meant. What kind of piece you here? I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You're not fooling me. I know you're a cop. What kind of gun you got?" I said, "Man, get out of my face." Well, then it hit me. It's like, nobody's going to try to sell us drugs. There's no prostitute going to come up and try to resist us. We look like cops. We didn't have on uniforms. We had on sport jackets. But compared to most, we did ourselves in a way of authority. And we were what you would expect back in those days anyway. That's why it's easy for us to get played. And it makes it easy for those in authority to play us. Not just on the level of personal appearance, but what is presented to us all the way through life, from politicians to the media, everything. There's propaganda. This propaganda is fed to us from within our bubble. If you do a survey of Americans, you'll find that not that many on the big picture, not that many Americans that travel far outside the United States. I was surprised after years and years and years to find out that at Athens, Alabama, from school, the students I went to school with and graduated with, 12 years in grade school with these kids, that even up in their 50s, so few of them had ever left town. And some of them have barely traveled out of state. And that's just the nature of some people. We are trained that way. Now, it's a little different than when I was a kid. When I was a kid, first of all, very few went on to university. Most at best got maybe a associate's degree. A lot of guys went to technical school, but very rare went to beyond an associate, maybe a bachelor's degree. There was a lot of masters of arts and that sort of thing. Most back then, you got married pretty quick out of high school. These guys like 18, 19, by 20, you were married. you were working a job. Usually you went to Montana, 3M up on the river and job, or worked at a welding shop or something like that, and you stuck with it for life. Today, that's not true. Today, these guys are jumping, and I've talked to people, you know, in this wedding thing, I get to know all these people. First of all, people don't get married as young as they used to, not at all. And that goes back even further because your grandmother and great grandmother were probably married before they were 18. A lot of them got married at 16 and 17. So now we got people getting married a lot older. And most of the weddings I do, these people are at least in their 30s and up. And then divorce is so very common. Split families is so very common. It was such a rarity in our world back when I was a kid. You stuck two things thick and thin. And you just like I said, you got a job, you stuck with it for 40 years. You didn't go around shifting jobs. You had that job, and that's what you did for your life. It's like, okay, I'm working toward the end of that, whatever, to my retirement, and that's what they did. And it's the same way with marriage. So now people getting married much older. When my sister, who never got married, was considered an old maid, and that's not unusual now. I know guys, a lot of guys in their 40s, not married. I know a lot of guys that they're straight, they're not homosexual. They just never got married, don't have any kids, or they're up in their 40s, and they're still kind of just doing their thing. It's a whole different world. Back in Bible days, and this is why some people will insist that Jesus had to be gay, because 2,000 years ago in the Jewish culture, if a guy was in his 20s and wasn't married, especially Jesus' age in the Bible as he grew, something was wrong. You got married, something was wrong. It all has to do again with this you're being played. Because do you really have freedoms? Do you really have freedoms? And I'm not just talking about the Black Lives Matter movement. Let's just wash skin color. Let's wash all that away, just as humans. How much freedom do you really have? When I started driving, a lot of cars didn't even have seat belts. I'm not arguing that seat belts are advantageous. They save lives. I'm not arguing that at all. But you weren't required by law to have to wear those things and protect yourself. We've allowed, and let's get this straight. The seatbelt laws did not come because we've got a benevolent government. Let's get this straight. There was right benevolent elected officials saying, we want to protect you. We want to save your life. We want you to wear this seatbelt to protect yourself. That wasn't the game plan at all. Seatbelt laws came into existence because of insurance companies saying, we don't want these people getting hurt so bad because we're having to pay all these expenses on these accidents. So we want less injuries. So they lobbied the government to force people to protect themselves. And this came about in a big shift at the same time that they were putting airbags. The seatbelts came first, and then they changed the bumpers on cars. You had those 5-mile-an-hour bumpers, 10, whatever. You may be aware of that, and to make cars more safer. And this was all pushed not because there was any great concern by any government official, any politician, over your safety or your health. That was bullshit. This all came from insurance companies. It all boiled down to money. It all boiled down to money. And so that's why these laws came into existence. And this is how you're being played. Because your dad would tell you, well, it is the law to wear a seatbelt. It's, and so forth and so on. So instead of these things coming about because someone was actually concerned, about you. They came about because of money. That's my great aunt, as I've told this story many times. Her dying words, it all boils down to money. And this is just the truth. And it's the same way with all the wars and the conflicts, the soldiers, the military. You respect the soldiers, and we get all emotional over Veterans Day and Memorial Day. We just really just go ape crazy over dead soldiers. And nobody reasonable thought is like, gosh, we cared that much about these people, we would do more about striving for peace and not putting people in wars, right? But by building all this up, someone had to die. Someone had to fight and die for your freedoms. So I want you to think about this. If that were true, if that were honest true that you got freedoms from these conflicts, we would be a real free people. But we're not. In the world of modern nations, we are somewhere around 22nd or 23rd in ranking of personal freedoms. In our 241 years of existence as a nation, we have had less than 2 decades of not being in conflict. We've either been in constant conflict or on the edge of conflict. I was born under the presidency of President Eisenhower. He's the one that coined the term military industrial complex. We'd been through World War I, World War II, and Korean War by the time that I came to be. And this is, of course, after the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the war, all these other wars that we've been in constant conflict with. In the bubble that you're in, it's like, I don't care if you were in Italy, if you were in Korea, wherever you were, we're all in this bubble. We're in the bubble of the United States. Wave the red, white, and blue, Pledge of Allegiance, proud American, and that's where we are. And then, of course, other nations do the same thing for where they got their colored flags, they got their national anthems, they've got their little militaries, they've got whatever. We just happen to have the biggest and baddest. Okay, we're a very young nation, and we gained a lot of power very quickly as a young nation. So here we are, and you've been played to think that you actually gained freedoms from all these dead soldiers. And we praise these dead soldiers. And all these poor kids coming up all over and around the country are trained to idolize these men in uniform, carrying guns and going off to battle. You'll see them at airports sometimes that some guys in his military garb, and he has gotten off a plane and walking through the airport, and you'll see some people, thank you for your service, and that kind of stuff. Just, you don't even know what the guy did. What service did he give? Maybe he was mopping floors. I don't know. But you got to really look at things very critically, because it's propaganda. I'm not demeaning soldiers. I'm demeaning what we idolize these people. We put these people on a level that's just not reality. You're being played with this because they want that emotional pull. They want you to immediately see that uniform and think, oh, you have served our nation. Thanks to you, I have freedom. See, the moment you're born, that one split second that you come out of your mother's womb, you are free. You don't know how free you are because you haven't developed to appreciate any freedom at all. And immediately you take that first breath, the government stamps a number on you, and you immediately have no choice, but you're immediately put under that you had no input to. You just happened to be born under it. You could have been born in Africa. You could have been born in Egypt. You could have been born in the UK. You could have been born anywhere in the world. Wherever you were born, you're immediately under a set of laws and restrictions that you had no say. You're born and raised under it, having no understanding of it. What you're fed as far as the history of it, what you're fed as to how this transpired. A lot of it is propaganda. You don't get the real picture. You just know that I'm American. My neighborhood here, house has got the flag waving in the front yard. That don't impress me. Anybody can put a flag up. That don't impress me at all. That's for show. That doesn't demonstrate that you're a good citizen. It doesn't demonstrate that you're good anything. It doesn't even demonstrate that you're an American. I could be over here with a freaking visa from Iran and wear an American flag on my breast and plant one on my car, and it doesn't mean anything. See, that's how easily we're played. Because you could put on this uniform of being, whatever you want to be. Now, it's illegal to dress like a present yourself police officer. It's illegal to present yourself, even in Alabama, as a clergy, if you're not a clergy. These things are illegal. Of course, that don't stop people from doing it. We hear about these things, and it's according to how it's used and abused, and what processes does it go through. Well, it's harder to become a cop than it is to become a preacher. So you can present yourself in a certain fashion, and people immediately buy it. You can be told from birth certain things. Nobody likes to get up and say, "Oh, wow, Mom and Dad were wrong. They taught me wrong." That's not what people generally want to say, but unfortunately, we carry on this propaganda. Why in America do we celebrate Columbus Day? Why in the United States do we celebrate what's known as Columbus Day? Really? Why? Why do we Columbus? Okay, I'm back. I don't know what happened there. And I'm at home, believe it or not. I'm at a little hiccup. I noticed that my screen went crazy too. But here's the deal. Forgot where I was. Had to get that reset real quick. But we're being played. You're being played all the way through. Columbus never set foot on this land, but yet we celebrate Columbus Day. And really and truly, that thing with Columbus is not something to be event. That's not something to be celebrated. Columbus Day. It's really not. We call the indigenous people of this land American Indians, Native Americans. First of all, they're not Native Americans because there was no America here. You couldn't be native to something that did not exist. They had never heard the term America. They were not Indian. That term came about because these settlers, if you will, these Columbus and those kind of people that came over, thought that they were landed in India. So they just, "Oh, you're Indian." They're not Indian, and they're not Native American. They're indigenous of this land. You see how this thing plays out. And it is so we do this so commonly with so many things. And I want you to expand this from what I'm telling you here. You've got a mind, use it. It's like we say the sun rises and the sun sets. Why do we say those terms? Because 400 years ago, the common belief is that the sun revolved around the earth. That was the common belief. It's not true. Galileo came along and said that's not right. The church punished Galileo. It took the church 350 years before they said, oops, we were wrong, Galileo. We're sorry. After he was dead, they apologized to him, right? The earth revolves around the sun, but we still say the sun rises and the sun sets. It does neither. The sun doesn't go anywhere. We go around the sun. So, but you see how these terms teach things backwards. And so you're being played with all this stuff. Those words do account to something because they are misleading. They are just words, but they are misleading. It's like the words of the Star Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance, and a lot of people hate this, but the words "one nation under God" were not put into the pledge until 1954. Easy for me to remember that because it was put in there the year I was born. One nation under God. First of all, is your God so superficial that that's what it takes to please your God? They're putting me in the pledge to their flag, so I'm going to bless them. Oh yes, that's a very strong-minded God. I'm not sure about that. That's to me a very weak God. Just kind of like the president we got now, who's got to seek praise. It's like, no, that's not. So, indigenous people, are not American Indians. They're not Native Americans. That's bullshit. The proper term that a lot of people, Canada uses it more than we do, is they'll say the First Nations, talking about their original tribes. Well, First Nations, they were the First Nations on this land, you could say, even though their way of life did not structured anywhere like what we've got. So you are automatically trained in these ways, and you're being played with these words. It's just like birthdays, anniversaries, weddings. The engagement ring that goes on the girl's finger. Think about how you're being played here. Why doesn't the guy get an engagement ring? Because it's a movement to where the man is still in control, and they built it. The Bears Diamond Company really did a very effective job about playing people, again, for money. Oh, they played people for money very strong. The Bears, the Diamond Company. A diamond is a girl's best friend. Well, they convinced girls that a diamond was their best friend. They convinced the guys that they had to get the girls a diamond. That engagement ring was very important. That is marking your territory. That goes back to very, very ancient days. In almost the oldest of days, they would take a twig or some plant and twist it around a girl's finger and mark her. This is my woman. And it evolved. And then the Bears came along. And first of all, diamonds are not rare. Let's get that very straight. You overpay for diamonds. They are not rare. They use slave labor to dig those diamonds out in Africa. It's bullshit. And I see these rocks, and these people go in debt for these, marketing sold people on the idea that you had to have an engagement ring. If it were equal partners in this, where's my engagement ring? Is it just her that's getting married? We focus on the bride, don't we? We dress her up, we make her beautiful, she walks down the aisle, her dad gives her away. I do this. This is what forever, Who gives this woman to be married to this man? You got to get what? This is a 30-year-old woman. She's a human being and she's given away like property. But we accept this whole, we instill this thought. It's conveyed subtly. First of all, you've got to get an engagement ring. It's got to be a diamond because diamonds, the Bears, they really racked it up, didn't they? Just like the American Indian, the Native Americans, it's bullshit. The whole thing's bullshit. You're being played. The ritual of the wedding. Christianity is worried about that piece of paper. I was brought up fundamentalist, very conservative Christianity. It was like, ooh, I don't get that marriage license from a state and go through this ritual, I'm committing the grossest of sins by having sex. I had to go to the state and get a license, pay a fee to the state, get a license to have sex. We bought this. And there's still people that believe it. There's still people that buy the shit. You got to go through this process. I've got to have a preacher stand in front of me and saints in the church has got to say, I got to have permission. I got to have permission. The woman's got to be given to me. I got to put a ring on her finger. She's got to wear a white dress. Nobody knows where this came from. They just assume. They say now that they wear a white dress because it indicates purity. And it's bullshit. It doesn't. They wear a white dress because some royalty back in the 1800s got married in a white dress, and they saw the pictures of it and thought, ooh, we're going to wear a white dress. We're going to act like royalty. Seriously. The most expensive dress that a woman generally buys in her lifetime, the average woman, is her wedding dress one time she wears it. We've created this monster, and that's just part of it. I'm just using weddings because my background is in that. I think it's ridiculous. But you think of all these things, Columbus Day. Columbus had nothing to do with our country, and the background of what Columbus did is not worthy of a celebration. American Indian. They can't be American Indian. Native Americans. First of all, they're not Indian, they're indigenous. They've never been to India. They never heard of an American. They couldn't be Native American. We put this there because we won't, that empowers our government, really, the Native American. And that term natives gives an indication because of what fiction did. In the early days, when you thought of natives, you thought of barbaric, tribal type, with spears. And they used to call them spear chunkers. I mean, I'm sure you've heard of those terms. And so we still use this lingo from today. You're still being played. Number one, you don't have fucking freedoms. You got to get a license to do everything. Unless you live way out in the boonies somewhere where they don't have any restrictions, nobody's watching you and reporting you to anybody. Most of these neighborhoods, these urban areas, you got to get a permit to paint your garage door a different color. You're paying, most of these neighborhoods have these associations that they're actually paying an annual fee to be told how to live. Now, is that retarded? Because they're scared their neighbor's going to have something in the yard they don't like. They want to get together and construct this neighborhood to say, we're going to vote, and the majority in this neighborhood is going to say no red garage doors. They all got to be beige or white, some neutral color. You got to have 2 trees in your yard, a bush over here. And people call that freedom. And they pay. Police. We don't call them, but they're called law enforcement. Why are they called law enforcement? Because that's the honest to God truth there. Police don't stop crimes. You think about it. Laws and punishment. See, this is how the whole system is playing. Do laws stop speeding? Think about speeding tickets every day. People speed every day. It doesn't stop it. It's against the law and has been against the law in every culture going back to the beginning of time. Murder is illegal. Hasn't stopped murder. We have the death penalty. Still didn't stop murder. Murder still takes place. Texas killing them right and left, executing. And they still got murder after murder after murder. Come on. Robbery? We got laws against that. We lock people up. Why do you think states finally broke down and said, screw this, we're going to make marijuana legal? Why? It didn't stop marijuana. We're locking them up. People still smoking marijuana. Laws are ineffective. Punishment, this reward and punishment system doesn't work. Reward and punishment worked. Then Christianity would be this perfect realm of people, because if they truly believe the bullshit they're spreading, then they would be very fearful of their God sending them to hell to burn forever. And they'd really want that prize in the sky of eternity to get their wings and their halo and play that harp. So if that stuff was real to them, really, really real to them, they wouldn't be concerned about 60, 70, 80 years of time on this little planet. They wouldn't be concerned about who's president. They wouldn't be concerned about collecting material things, because they're living forever. What's this bullshit? I'm going to die and go to a special place. What am I worried about this crap? This is very temporal. But they don't believe that. They're caught up in the here and now because everybody's being played. It's all control. It's all manipulation of the mind. And you're being played, and nobody steps back. I bring this up. The Founding Fathers. Oh, I heard that. I'm violating the Constitution. The Founding Fathers is like, you realize the Founding Fathers wrote the words, all men are created equal. But they were, first of all men. They were all white men, and they were all slave owners. Well, that's just the way it was back then. Yes, it was the way it was back then, wasn't it? And we still have racism to the max today. Gosh, I see these videos. One out of Decatur, Alabama. Somebody's robbing his package store in Decatur. He calls the cops. He legally has a gun. He's holding the robber by a gun. The cops come in and beat the store owner. Send him to the hospital, break his fucking jaw. Police state. You're in a police state. The foreign language I studied in university was Russian. Strasbourg, как вы поживаете? Up in Brooklyn, New York, is a huge Russian community in Brooklyn. I spent time in Brooklyn. This is back before the Soviet Union fell apart, before the Berlin Wall came down. This is back in the days. And there were some Soviet nationals from Soviet Georgia, from Soviet Russia, that had come to Brooklyn in those days. They would tell me back then, we're talking about the 70s, 1970s, they would say, man, y'all got more of a police state here in the United States than we do in Soviet Russia. Seriously. But we don't see it because we got all this propaganda. You know? We got this very moving, passionate national anthem, and we've got these wonderful words of, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one nation under God, blah, 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 words. And we put so much meaning into those words, and the reality is those words don't mean crap. These soldiers fought and died for your freedom. No, they didn't. Iraq and topple a government unnecessarily, killed a lot of innocent children unnecessarily. The ones they didn't burn and maim, working fathers. I'm not anti-military. I am anti-stupidity. You're being played. You're being played. Get out and vote. Your vote matters. Let me tell you what, I've been alive since I was president. Forget about what's happened before, which I've studied that. All this voting. We've got, thanks to Lexington, we've got the Civil Rights Act from the 1960s, the Civil Rights Act. You couldn't tell it today, could you, that we have the Civil Rights Act thing? Could you tell it, really? 50, 60 years later, we've got more protests. 50, 60 years later, we've got more riots. Where have we gone? We've gone nowhere. My words are not going to change any of this. Maybe if I wake somebody up, and the purpose of waking somebody up is so that you can grab a hold of your life, so that you can live your life, and you can maintain your independence from all this peripheral bullshit. I don't advise you to get in the face of an authority, the police, and light up a joint. That's not the point. But I'm saying that you can. Why do you think in his life, Donald Trump was able to get by the things that were sent you and I to jail, right? Have you thought about that? The accusations. It's amazing the things he's gotten by with. If you really study this man out, because I had prior before him getting involved in this political bullshit, it's because they've got the money to hire the experts, from the tax accountants to the lawyers, all the way through, to manipulate the system to their benefit. The average Joe Doe, we live in fear of the system because we don't have the ability to manipulate it and to understand it at their level. But they know all the loopholes. They know all the catches in there to be able to play this game. So they end up being the ones that are not being played. They're doing the playing. So anyway, you are being played. There are no American Indians. Well, not the ones you think of. There are some people that moved here from India that became American. But the indigenous people of this land were not Indian, and were not Native Americans. Columbus had nothing to do with the United States of America. You're being played. I hope everybody has a great Tuesday, and I hope, I got somebody to thank. That's it. Here's your head.